Hello, and welcome to Shaping Government and the Judiciary through Local and State Appointments. This program is brought to you by the ABA Young Lawyers Division and is part of the A Seat at the Table initiative. The Young Lawyers Division is the ABA's home for the new attorney, giving members tools to navigate the early years of a career, opportunities to network, and resources to grow skill sets. A Seat at the Table encourages young attorneys to get involved in their communities, educating them on what it takes to run for office, serve on local, state, and nonprofit boards and commissions, and to advocate on issues of importance to young lawyers in the legal profession. I am Jennifer Robinson, and I will be serving today as today's moderator. I'm a member of the Young Lawyers Division Civic Engagement Team, and I'm an attorney with the Missouri State Public Defender's Office. Joining me today are Julie Baker, Jeff Dunn, and Ashley Wilson. Julie Baker is Deputy General Counsel in the Missouri Governor's Office. Julie will be covering judgeships. Jeff Dunn is an ambassador with Boxcar PR and former Executive Director of Boards and Commissions in the Kentucky Governor's Office. Jeff is talking about boards and commissions. Ashley Wilson is an associate with Bowman and Brook LLP and a commissioner of the South Carolina State Ethics Commission. Ashley is sharing her personal experience as a commissioner. All right, let's get started.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Julie Baker, and I am Deputy General Counsel for Missouri Governor Mike Parson. Governor Parson took office in June of 2018, and I have been part of his legal team since that time. Our legal team consists of 4 attorneys, the General Counsel, 2 deputy counsels, and a special counsel. And we are responsible for a wide variety of legal tasks in the governor's office, but one of those tasks that we are responsible for is helping the governor with his appointment of judges. As many of you probably know, Missouri has a unique plan for the selection of certain judges, which is known as the Missouri Plan. It is the nonpartisan selection of judges. This was adopted by Missouri voters in the 1940s as a way to remove some of the political aspect of the way judges are selected. Now, the Missouri Plan actually does not apply to all circuits in Missouri. The nonpartisan court plan covers the selection of judges for the Missouri Supreme Court, the 3 courts of appeals in Missouri, Eastern, Western, and Southern, and then 6 circuit-level courts have voted to be a part of the nonpartisan court plan. And those are courts primarily in the Kansas City and St. Louis regions of our state, and Springfield, Missouri, which is Greene County, is part of the nonpartisan court plan. The rest of the circuits in our state are just normal judicial election circuits where judges put their names on a ballot and either run as Republicans or Democrats. The way that the governor is involved in the nonpartisan court plan, there are judicial commissions. There's an appellate judicial commission, which governs the selection of judges for the Supreme Court and the courts of appeals, and then each local circuit that is part of the nonpartisan court plan also has a judicial commission. The appellate commission consists of the Chief Justice of the Missouri Supreme Court, 3 lawyer members who are elected by members of the Missouri Bar, and then 3 non-lawyer members who are appointed by the governor. For our circuit-level judicial commissions, the members are the Chief Justice of that Court of Appeals for whatever circuit it is, and then 2 lawyer members that are elected by members of the bar, and 2 non-lawyer members who are appointed by the governor. So that's one way that the governor is involved, in the appointment of members of the commission. When there's a vacancy in one of these courts, the commission will solicit applications from judges and other attorneys that want to be judges. They apply for the position by submitting resume and answers to questionnaires, and then the commission determines which applicants to interview. Now, historically, for the past few years, the commission has interviewed all applicants, but they reserve the right to select certain applicants if the pool should be too large to interview everyone. So the applicants attend an interview with the commission. The commission meets and selects a panel of 3 from those applicants and submits those names to the governor. So at this point, we are more directly involved with the selection. So the Judicial Commission sends us the names of those panelists along with their application materials. And then our office will contact those individuals, seek some further application materials and an additional questionnaire. And then we schedule an interview for the applicants to come meet with us in the governor's office for an interview. Governor Parson decided that for appellate positions and Supreme Court positions, he wanted to interview those individuals personally, and for the circuit court positions, the legal team just conducts the interview. So our team usually spends about a half an hour with the applicant, asking them various questions about their experience and their background. And then we put all application materials together along with a brief for the governor. And we sit down with him and talk about the pros and cons of each panelist. And then from that point, it's up to the governor to make his decision. We also receive numerous letters of support from people who know the panelists, and we read each and every one of those, as that's very important information if people have support. As part of the nonpartisan court plan, the governor has 60 days per the Constitution to make a selection. That's 60 days from the date that we receive the panel of 3 individuals. So the clock starts ticking, and then the governor makes his choice. And it's really interesting to be involved in the process. I view it as a high privilege that I get to sort of see behind the curtain how judges are selected, and it's just been very, very interesting. We also are involved with the selection of judges in elected circuits if there is a vacancy before an election. If a judge retires due to mandatory retirement or otherwise, or they resign for some reason, if the circuit has a need to fill that position before the next election, the governor has the statutory and constitutional authority to make that appointment. That process is a little bit different. It's slightly more informal since there is no 60-day clock. There's no panel of 3 applicants. So it's a little more open. If there is a vacancy in one of our normal circuits, we open up the position on our boards and commissions website to receive applications. And when we receive those, then we go through them, and depending on the number of applications we get, we'll bring those individuals into our office for a similar interview, and then we brief the governor, and he makes his choice as to who he would like to appoint. So they asked me to speak about some sort of tips or pointers if you think you would ever be interested in becoming a judge. One thing we look for in judges is, a diverse legal background. It definitely helps if you have experience in different areas of the law. Having your entire career as a prosecutor absolutely is not prohibitive of us, recommending a selection as a judge, but it always is good to have diverse legal experience. Community involvement is very important, particularly to our governor. He wants to see that attorneys and judges are not only doing their job very well, but they're supporting their communities, they're volunteering, they're getting involved in other ways. Support, I already mentioned, is important. We, of course, take highly, if someone speaks highly of an individual, we take that to heart, and it definitely helps. Now, the number of support letters doesn't necessarily matter. I think some people choose quantity over quality, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. I know I would, and the governor would much prefer, a heartfelt letter from someone who really knows the individual in a letter of support versus just a kind of a form letter that gets sent out from 50 people who maybe have met you one time. That's not as supportive, really. Age doesn't really matter. Of course, we have mandatory retirement age for judges, but the governor's appointed individuals, just a few years out of law school to, have individuals who have had 30, 40-year careers. So anyway, hopefully that's some helpful information for how the process works in our state. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And otherwise, I think I'll just pass the torch along to learn more about boards and commissions.
All right, thank you, Julie. This is Jeff Dunn I was employed by Governor Steve Beshear from 2007 till 2015. As you'll notice on our website here, as of 12/01 yesterday, the 10th, we had a new governor. First time it's happened. The son of Governor Steve Beshear, Andy Beshear, our former Attorney General, is now our governor. So that's the first time it's happened in Kentucky that you've had a father-son combo. So in the interim, as we were going through this process, it was pretty interesting. We weren't sure what was going to happen, but they have whitewashed the process and gone through and have a generic form here still with no names from the previous governor and everything. But this website is the same that we used. I started in 2009 in boards and commissions. I did it for almost 6 years till 2015. And most of the process, as Julie stated, is very similar to what they did. A lot of what we do in Kentucky is related to what laws or what statutes are provided for us to create certain boards or anything. But we'll get into that in a minute. But I'll get back to Julie's stuff as well, because we are very, very similar to how they do things, and I'll use that as an example. So this is just an overview. You see it has a little blurb that I think we wrote in 2007 and then kept in 2009. I think I have, yes. Okay, so up until yesterday, as soon as this pops up, it was had the executive director previously named. So the world of the internet and the world of technology moves pretty quickly. This is the form that we used. These forms are very important. Julie mentioned letters are important, recommendations are important. We had over 500 boards, and whether it was the Board of Cosmetology, the Board of Nursing, university boards, judicial appointments. We handled judicial appointments, but I will save you, or will tell you that the General Counsel's office was vital in all of my appointments, that they saved me to make sure that I didn't do anything outside the law or do anything that did not follow the law. So we had very good checks and balances in Kentucky when I was there, and I'll go through those. But this is the application you could submit for it. Again, it hasn't changed and was used all during Governor Matt Bevin's previous 4 years. But again, it has vital information that we needed. One, to get to know you from a staff level. I had a deputy as well as 2 staff members. And then we had a number of senior staff and General Counsel's office that reviewed the process. I went through, because it was our governor was inclusive of bringing his whole senior staff into it at my asking, to make sure that I didn't do anything wrong, that we saw as many eyes on it as possible. And again, some of those were very minor appointments, but no appointment is too minor, because if it's as I said, cosmetology, nursing, a lot of the occupation and professional boards, the statute requires that all of them be members from the industry or from the field, and it's very important to them. It's their livelihood. So again, this application was the first step. It is now online. When I first started back then, it had to be printed off and mailed in, or maybe even faxed in, if we had it. But you just go through and you kind of can see there what we're looking for. We want to learn as much about you as possible. We also, and I found this interesting because it was still here, and I'm glad Governor Bevin kept it, but this executive order was done in 2008 by Governor Steve Beshear, and this stayed in, which I'm glad Governor Bevin did. Governor Bevin and Governor Beshear are of different parties. Politics does play a role in some appointments, but for the most part, as I just said, these positions are mandated by a statute and are people's livelihoods. Agricultural appointments, a lot of professional boards and commissions. Here's some of the ones that were covered under the regulatory and policy-making ethical guidelines that we created under that, or that our general counsel's office and the governor created. Again, but that's a few listings. Not all boards are covered under this, but again, this is just some of them. So you can see that. So again, we're glad that the ethics background of this portion was kept, and that these were adhered to, and that you couldn't, do business with regulated by, seek grants from, involvement, $25 per single meal or anything from a year. So this was good. People had to sign this when they sent their application in if they were appointed. So it was kind of a way to make sure we had a good checks and balances. Moving on, kind of back, we also had a disclosure of conflict interest form, which is another checks and balances. And this is kind of where some of those questions, what I just talked about, you can go through. We also did an extensive, now in Julie knows this, we used a in-house system as well as a criminal background system if the board appointment rose to the level of a judicial nominating or judicial appointment, depending on how big the appointment was and how public it was, is everybody received a in-house, I think we used LexisNexis. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's what we used in-house. And then if we had to go do a criminal background check, we used NCICS, I think, from our state police division. Again, that cost a little extra, and we didn't do that on every appointment. But if it was something that needed that, that's just an extra level. Most of ours was for legal, court cases, liens, tax liens. I was the largest tax collector, I believe. The revenue department loved me because if we found an issue, we had to clear it up before the appointment could proceed. And some people, 1, couldn't do it, 2, chose not to do it, or 3, paid it. So therefore, I did a pretty good job. They liked me there. So I was glad I was able to bring some revenue into the state. The next 2 things, and I'll pull up this one because it's basically the same. The other one is just an alphabetical listing of each of these boards. But if you go through here and look, this is a full description of every board that we had We had some printed versions of these, binded nicely and done when I first came in. As I said, we just started a new administration yesterday. They don't have an executive director, boards and commissions, but they will come through. Typically, when a new governor comes in, we at least send out letters seeking folks to apply, asking for applications for people that were interested in serving on boards and commissions. Again, we had over 500 boards. That's like 6,000 or 7,000 appointees. Kentucky has way too many boards. We'll go ahead and say that. But again, we can't control that. A lot of it is by statute and created by the legislature, and the governor just follows the law by making these appointments. But when you go through and look, these are in alphabetical order. Let me see if I can get down to what Julie was talking about. Sorry, I'm skipping through here but I want to find her example. Almost there. I can't do multiple things, but I'm almost there. Just bear with me. I think it'll be easier for folks to tell. And it's kind of delayed. Sorry, I'm pulling as fast as I can. So we are almost there. One more. So using Julie's example in Missouri, you will notice, whoops, sorry, went too far. You will notice that way too far. I was right on it. Now I'm not. Delayed technical. All right, here we are. Don't move. Okay, so this example brings up Julie's Missouri example. In Kentucky, the Chief Justice was the chair of the Judicial Nominating Commissions. We had Court of Appeals and Supreme Court, as well as each judicial district. I think there's 30 in Louisville, Kentucky. I think there's 6 or 8 in Lexington, but each district had their own. The Chief Justice served. And again, you see this is set up by the Constitution and a KRS revised statute. The Chief Justice serves as well as 2 members appointed by the Kentucky Bar Association, elected by their fellow members, nominated and elected and sent to the governor, and then 4 members of the general public that were non-lawyers appointed by the governor, so a total of 7. So again, when we went through the process and we're looking at nominating folks, we're looking for the same folks. We're looking for folks that are qualified, meet the criteria of the statute and the Constitution, and go through the whole process that they don't have any. And again, in this instance, they have to be lawyers, So that process is pretty much the same. I wanted to show you this one because a lot of the appointments are the same, whether it's a judicial appointment in Kentucky or whether it's, again, the Board of Nursing, University Board of Kentucky's trustees, except whether it's the constitutional or revised statute changes that. So that's a little gist there about what we do. And again, I can take some questions as well, but I think you see that we went extensive backgrounds just as every other state does. And I will tell you this, and I think Ashley will attest to this, as a person that's been there on the inside before, and Julie will as well, but it can be an intimidating process. But we are open. We need nominations. We need recommendations. We need people that are qualified. And a lot of the statute sometimes brings people forth and they recommend people that are in the industry, and then the governor gets to choose. But a lot of the appointments are just wide open, and we are always out there seeking and looking for folks. And Ashley serving on the Ethics Commission in South Carolina was an ideal candidate type of person that we'd be looking for. We also did our best on diversity, on men and women, and it was very important to the governor to have we have to also have a Democrat to Republican ratio. That's important. So again, there is a lot that plays into this selection of people, but by no means should anybody be scared to seek out a website like this on your governor's website in the state that you're in, to fill out an application of something that you're interested in, whether it's legal or whether it's, there's a lot of board appointments that have just citizens at large. So whether you're a lawyer, you could go serve on something that you have an interest in. There are and is a need for people to apply and be willing to serve. It's admirable to do. I was humbled to serve for 8 years and 6 years in this position as the board and commissions director for the governor. And it was a great job, and I loved it, and it taught me a lot. But again, there's a lot of folks that don't think they can apply, or just don't apply, or don't know where to go. And again, this is a place to go. So I think that's probably about my time. And if anybody had any questions or anything, I'll feel free to answer.
Hey, y'all, this is Ashley Wilson. That was kind of a great rev up there of the process, Julie, from Julie and Jeff. And I am going to be speaking just about my personal experience being selected to join the Ethics Commission in South Carolina. Just a little background about me. I practiced law in South Carolina. I started off, I clerked for a year, and I spent 4 years at the Attorney General's office, and I've spent almost the last 5 years in private practice at a national law firm based in Columbia. And so I guess I can speak to it from the standpoint of kind of not being in the internal workings of things, like Jeff and Julie from their roles. But I kind of got looped into my work from the Ethics Commission. I mean, in a totally innocuous way. Serving on a board or a commission wasn't really on my radar at the time. I was appointed to the Ethics Commission in April 2017, and probably, January, February, March, April. So probably maybe one day in February of that year, I was just, practicing law at my office, and I get a phone call from the lawyer at the Attorney General's office when I was there. That was pretty much like the second in command. And so I get this kind of innocuous phone call that's like, "Hi, Ashley, it's John. I want to talk to you about something. Can you give me a call back when you get a chance?" So the first thing I think is like, I do not think I want to return to my life as a government lawyer. Despite the fact that it was a wonderful experience, I was like, I kind of hit the groove in private practice. So I was a little kind of like, what is he calling me for? And so I ended up giving him a call back later that day, and come to find out that he had, since I left the Attorney General's office, also left the Attorney General's office, and he actually had moved into the governor's office, and he was serving as pretty much the second in command for our current governor, Henry McMaster, who before I got to the Attorney General's office was a South Carolina attorney, the South Carolina Attorney General. So, he just kind of said, hey, Ashley, we are appointing members of the new Ethics Commission in South Carolina, and we thought you might be a good fit, and the governor wants to appoint you. Which it's very, when he first said this, I was like, wow, that was really nice of you, but it sounded like a big job. And just as a little bit of a background about the Ethics Commission in South Carolina. So we implemented a new Ethics Act earlier that year. And so the Ethics Act would basically put the ethics complaints that were lodged against members of the legislature, the House and the Senate in South Carolina, it would put it under the purview of the commission, which is different because before the houses of the legislature kind of did their own policing. So now, under this new act that we are under now, the Ethics Commission and its kind of independent investigatory role and its commissioners would have authority to investigate ethics complaints and violations by members of the legislature, which kind of seems like a big deal, right? We had some recent kind of in the news, well-known legislatures get kind of in pretty big trouble in the courts and for some ethics violations. So that was very much a prominent issue in South Carolina at the time. It still is. And next year is an election year, so it'll be even more interesting. So for me, I was being asked to join a commission that was going to be comprised of all new members and would kind of have a new, bigger role than it had in the past. So I talked to John on the phone, and he said, I was like, okay, I have learned in my life as a lawyer, right, to not say yes on the first time. So I said, let me think about it, and he gave me the names of some other lawyers around town that had served on the commission. He said, call those folks, talk to them, call me back tomorrow. So I said, okay, that's fine. I'll do that. So I did a little bit of homework, called the other lawyers that one of them I knew. So I called her up and said, hey, you were on this ethics commission. What do you think about it? What was your experience like, et cetera? As an associate at a big law firm, and if we have any other folks listening to this webinar who live that life, you know that when you want to take on a big role that is maybe time consuming, the next thing you do is you go talk to your boss, right? So I went and talked to the managing partner of my office and just said, hey, I was asked to do this thing. I think it might be a little bit of a time commitment. Not exactly sure how much at the moment, but what do you think? And of course, his big, he's a South Carolina lawyer, and he said, when the governor calls you, you have to answer and say yes to serve. So I said, okay, all right, here we are. So I give the call back next day, and I said, okay, sure, I'll sign up. What do I need to do? And I think the what do I need to do part was kind of the most daunting of the process altogether. After I was the governor, I accepted his request to be appointed. I kind of had to go through a pretty rigorous approval process, which I don't think a lot of times when we think about boards and commissions, we think about it from the standpoint of being like a public servant, kind of a government, worker, but it ended up being a lot more intense than I thought. So in South Carolina, for a lot of these roles that are boards and commissions, particularly commissions, you have to go through a pretty rigorous approval process, which involves getting confirmed by both the House and the Senate. And so in South Carolina, the commission members are chosen. The governor gets to appoint 4 people. The House gets to appoint 2 people, one from the 2 major parties, and the Senate also gets to appoint 2 people, one from each major party. So all of us all of us were new. I think maybe one holdover from the commission before. We all had to go through the process where we completed an application. We had to get letters of recommendation, and we also had to fill out some very hefty financial disclosures, which I didn't really recognize was a thing, and it was kind of a little bit troublesome. You have to, I say troublesome in the sense that it's not something you do every day, and it's something that takes a little bit of time. I mean, you basically have to disclose to the members of the legislature and the people who are responsible for reviewing your application, like every source of income that you have, every dollar you pretty much earned in a certain time window, and also every debt you have. So you have to put, like, if you have a car and your car has a car note, you have to put how much your car is valued at. There's a lot of details that when you think about, like, I'm volunteering my time to my state, you're like, what is all this about? So that was a little bit of a rigorous process. Some of the other commissioners that are on the commission with me were kind of a little taken aback by it, because they were like, the things that you have to do to serve on a board or commission in our state is a lot more rigorous than what people have to do when they're elected publicly. So we're like, man, the boss of us, you know, the members of the legislature that have to approve us, they didn't have to go through the same rigor as we have to do to join a commission. But that's always kind of our running kind of joke on the commission. And so after I turned in all these applications, the second part of the process is that I had to be confirmed by the House and the Senate. And so in South Carolina, basically we had to go before each body, and the committee of the House and the Senate that were responsible for approving us was the Judicial Committee. So basically the same committee that selected judges in South Carolina or assisted with that process had to approve each individual. So one day I went before the House, another day I went before the Senate. And before I went before the full body of the committee for a vote, I had to go before a smaller panel of members. And they basically could just look at your application, ask you any questions they wanted to ask you about your financial disclosure, about your background, about why you wanted to serve on the commission. And so through this process, one thing that was very helpful is that I got a lot of assistance from the lawyer that was representing the Senate Judiciary Committee. So it was very helpful because I would turn in my paperwork and she would kind of walk me through the next steps. And so she was really a great resource for kind of providing me advice and explaining to me what was going to happen. So, for example, when I went before these smaller bodies, before I went up for the formal vote, she told me, she said, you can give a statement about why you want to join the Ethics Commission. I said, okay, great. So she's like, most people just prepare like a couple paragraphs. They can talk about their background, why they think this work is important, et cetera. So I would have never known that. I would have just kind of showed up, you know, being a litigator, ready to get quizzed up about, you know, my interests. So it was really, I think, thwarted off a lot of questions from the members on the smaller panel, because I started off by giving a statement. So I prepared a statement, and then I was just opened up for any questions. One thing that I think was a remarkable to me or notable part of that particular process is that in one of the panels, we went into kind of a closed executive session that was off the record, because these are public proceedings. So any newspaper, anybody can come in and watch you get grilled and kind of investigated before these panels. And so in one of the panels, we went into executive session, and one of the members of the legislature wanted to talk to me about my education debt. I can't do anything about that. But luckily, the lawyer who was kind of helping with the process told me that she looked at my application and she said, they may want to talk to you about your debt. And I, as a person who paid for myself to go to some of my college and all of my law school, I mean, I have student loans. A lot of people, you know, in America who have our background have that as an issue. And so he wanted to kind of, I perceived as a little bit of a scolding about my aspirations for public service and my debt. Which, you know, I kind of was like a little bit annoyed by that, because I think that as a country and as a state, we want to have people from diverse backgrounds, from a socioeconomic standpoint, particularly serving as public servants and on different boards and commissions and in elected political roles. So I kind of was like, if you want to encourage people to do that, that's a little But whenever I feel like maybe I'm being ridiculous, I consult other people. And so when I would ask other people about my experience, they said that it had a lot to do with the fact that people on certain boards and commissions, they really want to make sure that you're not susceptible to bribery, which is why they ask a lot about your financial health and that type of thing. So after I kind of got over that, which I think most people, you know, even as a young lawyer, we don't often have people, you know, prying into the ins and out of our finances, no matter how, you know, hard we work or whatever. So that was kind of a little bit part of the process that kind of took me aback. But after that, I was appointed and approved by the House and the Senate. So then I had the opportunity to serve. And it's been a great experience so far. I've been on the commission for 3 years, and I just signed up for a second round of service. So I'll be on there for another another 3 years. So that'll be exciting. I think that what I really have enjoyed about serving on the commission, and I just didn't have a commission or board on my radar, and even from like a professional standpoint, that just wasn't something I was like, ooh, that's something I should do. And not that I didn't have a heart for public service or anything like that, it just wasn't on my radar. And so as a commissioner, I really enjoy it because what the Ethics Commission does is we preside over investigations, and we hold probable cause hearings and then full hearings on ethics violations that are alleged against basically any public official or employee or a candidate for public office. Or so basically any member of the legislature, any state government or town or city employee, we reside over any ethics complaints that are raised against them. And so it's really been a great experience for me because I feel like as I'm the youngest person on the commission. There are 8 of us on the commission. There's about, I think there may be 5 lawyers, 3 non-lawyers, and it's been great because as a younger person, a younger professional, I feel like it really helped me kind of speak out a little bit more and raise my hand, because in that particular setting, it's basically as if the people coming before us, they're coming before an administrative body for us to, decide. It's like you go before 8 judges at one time. And so I don't know in my life if I'll have any aspirations to take the bench. But it's been great because it's given me the opportunity to kind of get a voice and like speak up and have practice doing that, because, a lot of us young lawyers sometimes in our careers, we work with more senior lawyers, so we don't really get the opportunity to raise our hand and say, well, this is what I think, and this is why I think that. And sometimes that's not really a comfortable place for us, because we're like, well, hey, the dude sitting next to me, he's been practicing law for 30 years. So if he doesn't know, then how do I, or he hasn't said it, then it must not actually kind of be a thing. So it's kind of helped me boost some of my professional confidence. And it's also just really interesting. I feel like as an individual, I'm using my skills to really kind of help restore the public trust in our officials and in people who run for public office. So that's kind of what I've gotten from it from a just personal and professional standpoint. If you're thinking about joining a commission, I think some things that I would go back and do, or I think that maybe I could have given a little more thought to, is just thinking about what do you want from the opportunity. I think it's totally okay for us to have that feel good, we're being a public servant, but also think about if you want to take on an opportunity that may raise your public profile in your profession, in your community or your state. I think I didn't exactly appreciate the fact that being on a commission like the Ethics Commission, how much my public profile would be raised. I have since been in a newspaper a couple times, which, is not always a great feeling, but I didn't do anything wrong. It's just people like to report on certain things that they find interesting, right? Also, I think sometimes we have to think about our role as a public official and if that will prohibit certain activities that you may normally do. For example, as a member of the Ethics Commission, we're not necessarily prohibited, but because we have a kind of investigative obligation or kind of duty or role over members of the legislature, we're kind of discouraged from attending political events, just so that if we have a matter come before us, we can try to avoid conflicts. Also, we have the same obligations as public officials as members of the commission. So even though I work in private practice, I still have to, every year, I have to file a statement of economic interest as a member of the Ethics Commission. I have certain ethical obligations that apply to me that may not apply to me in my everyday job as a lawyer in private practice. So you have to think about those type of things, because those may in some way heavily affect our day-to-day life and behavior, and even our reputation in practice as a young lawyer. So we have to think about that, and also our employer. I had to definitely get buy-in from my firm and my office to do this, because when I am in the newspaper for being an ethics commission, it's not like Commissioner Wilson, it's Ashley R. Wilson, attorney at Bowman and Brook LLP, commissioner on the Ethics Commission. So, you know, you also kind of have to think about that. You also, I think, we have to be cognizant of just conflicts that arise. Being on the commission with a good number of lawyers has really helped me with being able to better identify conflicts and how to address those conflicts. Most boards and commissions have a specific process for once you identify a conflict, what paperwork you have to fill out, that type of thing. But I don't think naturally that always is on our radar. We think about conflicts in the term of, you know, we're bringing in clients and we see those conflict checks every day, but we may not think about it in terms of our public service. So we also, as you know, professionals having dual roles and having work, especially in private practice, you have to be very cognizant of that. I think that's about kind of wraps up for me, but I really enjoyed my experience on the Ethics Commission. It's not a commission that is paid. I just learned that there's a thing called a commission where people get like a full salary, which is like mind blowing to me. I instead get a little lunch per diem basically whenever I go to the commission. From a time commitment standpoint, we meet once a month. So I know, you know, every third Thursday or something like that, I'm at the Ethics Commission. I may have to be there just for kind of commission business. I may have to be there full day for hearings. It just kind of depends. But I've had a great experience doing it. I think that as a young lawyer, it's a great way to kind of build confidence, a little more confidence in just your voice and your decision making. And I really have enjoyed it thus far. So I think everybody should try or consider having that type of role in their state or their community. And I think I am passing it back to questions. So if you have any questions.
Yeah, this is Jennifer again. We did have one question. I don't know, I think maybe whoever wants to answer it. Is there typically any type of training for commissions or board appointees? Like once you're appointed?
Hey, this is Ashley. I can only speak to this just because the commission that I joined, all the members were new except for one commissioner. Basically the commission before me was disbanded, and when the new ethics law came in, they had to appoint 8 new commissioners, and one of the commissioners from the last commission joined us. And so we did go through kind of a training process, but it wasn't really super rigorous. It was just an explanation for us of, this is what the process is. These are the laws that are applicable. This is how things will run. And then, you know, every time we have a set of hearings or every time we meet, we learn a little bit more. And sometimes we have points of conversation and discussion amongst the commissioners about the best way to do it, how we want to have fairness and continuity in our work and in our decisions. And so it's always kind of a working something, and a lot of it is as things come up, then we raise our hand and we're like, hey, what's the process on this? How does the commission normally handle this? So we had a little bit of a training process, but nothing too terribly intense. It was honestly a lot of on-the-job training.
This is Jeff. Yeah, each board has a staff, of course, and has executive directors and lawyers and operate their own boards based on the requirements of the law. And yes, they did do, some of them call them retreats, because everybody comes in at different times a year. There was once a year ethics training, where folks like Ashley or Ashley's executive director and staff would be asked to come out and deliver at a board meeting an hour or two, however long, presentation on ethics training. But each board was responsible for training, you know, not how to be a board member, because that's you know, the folks that we appoint are very, very solid in their backgrounds and very, very smart. But, you know, the statute, you know, the pay, the expenses, like Ashley said, some boards do have some pay requirements, some are per diem, some are expensed only. But that's not why folks do it. They do it for the service. Well, hopefully that's not why they do it, but they do it for the service to their state, and it's a good thing. I will tell you this: our executive director, specifically of the 79 ethics commission boards that again, I said not all of ours were under the Ethics Commission, but the ones that are because of regulatory reasons, we did a training, probably my 4th year in, so probably for the last 4 years or 3 to 4 years, each year. And it was great for me because, again, I'm not a professional in any of these, whether it's a Board of Architecture or the Board of Accountancy or whatever. I'm not a professional in any of those, but it was good to have their executive directors in. But we had their executive directors in once a year for a full day training for them, ethics training, how they relate with other board members, how they relate with board members as staff members, and things like that. So we did have some extensive training for staff members that they then were able to take back, hopefully to not cause any issues, or like Ashley said, not show up any newspaper articles about maybe some misgivings or just people that want to write a story about anything. So yes, there was some, but I don't think there's a uniform code for that.
Thanks. All right, I don't think I see any other questions. So I just want to thank you all for joining us today. I also want to thank our speakers, Julie Baker, Jeff Dunn, and Ashley Wilson. To learn more about the ABA Young Lawyers Division and the A Seat at the Table initiative, visit the ABA website.